In this video, I'm going to be trying my hand at painting a wheel. I got this wheel at the junkyard and it is a BMW wheel, and it's not the most beat up wheel in the junkyard, but it is pretty beat up. So that is why I selected it. I wanted one that was really chewed up to see if I could actually improve it or if there was areas where I just could not improve. So there's big gouges out of it. The entirety of the rim has curb rash, and there's just a lot of damage on this thing. So I don't know what happened to the vehicle. The vehicle didn't look like it was in a rollover or anything, but it has definitely hit a ton of curbs, and it is beat up, and it obviously has some big gouges out of it as well. So I figure if I can make this one look at least decent, you could probably make one that is not in this bad of condition look pretty good as well. So the first thing I'm going to do actually is take the Dremel tool here and grind out some of the deeper divots, because it's not just a divot, but some of the metal is being pushed up, creating sort of a rise in the metal. So I want to get rid of that. So basically any high spot that I could find, I'm going to come around and just knock it down so that it's at least flush with the rest of the rim. And I do come around on all of the curb rash, and I also give that a little bit of a grind with the Dremel tool just to reduce the amount of sanding that I'm going to have to do later, and just to make it a little bit more smooth overall. And then when it comes to hand sanding, I use 220 grit mostly, because I found that the finer grits just did not take off the clear coat paint and metal on the rim, or at least it would just take a very long time to get through it all. So the 220 was reasonable. I wouldn't go as low as like a 60 or 80 grit, but maybe down to a 180 would be reasonable as well. Overall though, I did find that the 220 grit gets some of the clear coat roughed up so that primer will stick to it, and then also get through some of the metal to smooth it off. 220 was pretty good. Now, the next thing I'm going to use here is Bondo, and this is to fix the really big divots. The Bondo that you should get is Bondo metal reinforced. I'm just using regular Bondo here because I had regular Bondo in my garage, so that's just what I'm going to use. But if you're going to start from scratch and you have to go buy Bondo anyway, definitely get the metal reinforced Bondo. And then obviously just apply it with the plastic scraper and make it as thin as possible. Don't overdo the Bondo, because it is very difficult to sand down once it comes time to sanding this stuff. And once again, for the Bondo, I am using 220 grit to smooth it out. And just like when I was sanding down the rim, the 220 grit did a good job. I wouldn't recommend going much lower than 220. And also at the same time, I found that if you went higher to like a 300 plus grit, that it would just get clogged up with the Bondo too quickly. So once again, I found that 220 grit was pretty good, and perhaps a 180 would also be fairly reasonable. And I just do that until the Bondo is smooth and there's no transition between rim and Bondo. And I do take some time here to get all the Bondo dust and sanding dust off the rim, and for that I just use an old rag. Now, I have seen online people use things like playing cards or whatever to jam in the wheel, but since I'm just doing so much painting on this thing, I figured I would just use painter's tape. And yeah, it took a little bit of time to get all the painter's tape on there, but I would say less than 10 minutes to get it all taped up. And the first thing I'm going to do is put down primer, and this is like a high build primer, so it will fill in a lot of the micro scratches, and I do come back around with 800 grit sandpaper on top of this primer, but I do also do a little bit more Bondo work after applying the primer, because I found that the first coat of Bondo didn't do a good enough job, so I do come back around and do a little bit more. And because this is a 10-spoke rim, it is a bit of a pain to try and get all the nooks and crannies done. And also, because I'm doing this outside, I had a little problem with like grass flying around, bugs and that kind of thing. So obviously, if you can do it in your garage or somewhere where you could get some cover, that would be 100% better. Now, like I said, after the first coat with the primer, I did notice some small imperfections that I did not notice before the primer went down. So I'm just using this Bondo glazing putty, and again, I also had that in the garage. It's a little thinner than regular Bondo. It probably doesn't set up as hard as regular Bondo, but it seems to do a good job at filling in all the little micro scratches and stuff like that. And for the glazing putty, I used 320 grit sandpaper to sand that down. Overall, for a rim this bad, I would plan for the better part of a day sitting around sanding it, painting it, waiting for paint to dry and that sort of thing. It does take some time, and I come back the following day and do the clear coat on it. I would say if you got a weekend, you could probably do all four. Obviously, you can sort of cycle out the sanding and painting and dry times, but definitely this is a bit of a time-consuming process to do. And after I get an additional coat of primer on to cover up that glazing putty, I do take, like I mentioned, 800 grit sandpaper and do a light sand on the primer once it's completely dried up. Obviously, if it was still tacky, it would definitely ruin your primer job and you'd have to start over. It would look like garbage. So wait till the primer's dry, then you could use the 800 grit sandpaper on it. Now for this, I did just get a can of spray paint that was on sale, and fortunately for me, the one that was on sale looks very similar to primer. It's obviously just sort of a silver, and as such it sort of blends in pretty quickly with the primer. And like I said, there are bugs and stuff now. It's getting a little bit later at night, so pretty annoying to do it outside when there's bugs and things like that. And I do 3 coats of paint, and for the paint I got, you do need to do it sort of 20 minutes per coat, and you need to finish everything within an hour. The next day I come back once the paint's fully dried up, and then I use clear coat on the rim, which is just a automotive wheel clear coat, which I got at Canadian Tire, but I'm sure they sell a similar product really anywhere. And it's a clear coat you could even put on your rim without doing any painting. For the clear coat, I do 3 coats, and obviously then I remove the tape to see how things look. And overall, it looks okay, but I also did want to do a polish on this thing. So I do use some of this Meguiar's cut, and then I come around after I do the cut on some of the spokes, and then I do a polish as well, also with a Meguiar's polish. And obviously it is going to help make the spokes look a little bit better because it'll clean up the clear coat and smooth it out and sort of remove any of the, you know, little undulations in the clear coat. Obviously you don't want to do too much cutting or you'll have the potential of going through your clear coat. Now compared to how the rim started, it looks really good. All the curb rash definitely is cleaned up, and even most of the deep divots are cleared up. You can see that there's still some imperfections that I could really work on. I didn't necessarily love the color choice of the paint. You can see some swirl marks. I didn't really do a great job on the cut and polish. I went pretty fast. Overall, I think it looks pretty good. 100% it doesn't look perfect, and if you got up close and personal with the rim, you would notice these imperfections. But if you were just driving by, I don't think you'd notice any of the imperfections on this. Anyway, thanks for checking out my video. Don't forget to like and subscribe.